Is the video in the back?
It should be happening any second now, and then you can go ahead and share it from my page. And we should be good. Yes, we are. We are live, and I'm getting ready to share this over to the group. So if you ladies want to share it to your pages, feel free to go ahead and do that. Good evening, everyone. We just wait for a few of you to jump on. And I want to share it to the page also. All right. You should be good. So good evening, everybody. How are you all doing today? I'm Mary Hayes, and I'm joined today with Kimberly Newman and Jamie Nettig and Vanessa Maddox. And we just want to say hey to you guys and hope all is well today. We know, particularly from the page and the various posts that we've seen all week long, there were some serious concerns about how the transition is going and what the GSA is doing and why these things are happening. And so we were able to have an expert come on today. Jamie was able to work her magical powers. And today we have Ngozi Nezianya with us today. And I just want to say thank you, sir. It is a pleasure and a privilege to have you on the show today. And we are going to well, first of all, I just want everybody to know we are having a postcard writing social on tomorrow, and that will be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So 2 p.m. tomorrow Eastern Standard Time. I put the information in the events. So there'll be a Zoom link there, and we're writing postcards for Georgia. So if you all already have your postcards, you don't even really need to have your address, because I have the information, the information that they want us to write on the postcards. I have that. So if you have your postcards, but you don't have your addresses, that's fine. Just come start doing your postcards so that when they send you the addresses, you can just, fill that in. So again, 2 p.m. tomorrow. We're looking forward to seeing you, okay? Jamie, we just want to dive right in. So if you wouldn't mind telling the people what a wonderful person we have with us today. I am so excited.
Well, I am truly honored to introduce to everybody Ngozi Nezianya. He currently is counsel at a terrific organization, which I suggest everybody checks out, which is called Protect Democracy. But prior to joining Protect Democracy, Ngozi worked as an associate at Simpson, Thacher, and Bartlett. And prior to that, he served as a senior research analyst at the Democracy Alliance, where he developed strategy for philanthropists and managed the due diligence and impact reviews of public policy institutes, public interest law firms, and issue advocacy organizations. He received a BA in political science from Yale, an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. I'm a Tucky, but I guess that one will do. And he got his law degree from Northwestern University as well.
That
was a little bit. That was a little bit where he was president of the American Constitution Society chapter and served as the student member of the American Constitutional Society National Board of Directors. So as you can see, we have a total slacker here to help us understand what the heck is going on with the GSA not certifying President-elect Biden as president-elect. And what he's going to help us understand is there are real implications for national security for this, for Biden's presidential team being able to prepare for their pandemic plan that's going to cost American lives. And there are all sorts of implications for this. But because this is an unprecedented situation, I got to tell you, in all of my years in the federal government, this is something I know a little bit about from a human capital strategy perspective, but I have never had to understand this in detail at all before. And Ngozi, can you explain to us what the heck is this at all?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for those kind introductions, Jamie and Mary. I really appreciate it. And thanks again for having me on. So this all goes to the Presidential Transition Act of 1963. It provides the president-elect and the vice president-elect with access to critical government resources, including national security information, funding, office space, and other things to ensure a smooth and effective transfer of power. That includes access to government personnel that are currently working on things such as the COVID-19 response and the plans to distribute a vaccine. It includes critical information needed to address pressing national security issues, such as the president's daily brief and pending decisions on possible uses of military force. And it includes the ability of the president-elect's transition team to obtain security clearances in advance of inauguration for individuals who will hold high-level national security positions in the new administration. However, these resources cannot be released until the administrator of the Government Services Administration has ascertained the apparent successful candidates for president and vice president. Now, under the law and for the purposes of determining whether a candidate will receive access to these critical government resources, the GSA administrator is the person who has to ascertain who the president-elect and the vice president-elect are.
So, but the person who has to do this isn't a federal careerist, right? This is somebody who was appointed by President Trump, and they're just not doing it.
That's right. The GSA administrator is Erin Murphy, who was appointed by President Trump in early 2017. And it is ultimately her decision to, under the law, ascertain who the president-elect is and the vice president-elect is. So it's not a careerist, it is a political appointee.
So because of this, though, for example, Biden, he's not getting security briefings. And if he wanted to, for example, when he's developing his pandemic plan, go talk to Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx, can he do that? I mean, because if I were a federal employee right now, I'd be kind of scared to start talking to President-elect Biden. I mean, is that part of my job? Are those hours that I can legally work? I mean, what are the implications there if I'm a federal employee?
Right, it's not entirely clear. So it's not entirely clear whether those federal employees could, on their own volition, begin talking to the transition team. Because under the act, under the Presidential Transition Act, the agencies have no obligation to provide security information, initiate background checks, as current government personnel meet with the Biden transition team regarding COVID-19 response, vaccine distribution plans, et cetera, until the GSA administrator ascertains who the president-elect is and the vice president-elect is. All those several resources under the Presidential Transition Act that get triggered only get triggered when the GSA administrator makes that determination. As you interpret the law, the determination of who's a president-elect and who's a vice president-elect for those purposes falls to the GSA administrator. So it puts the career employees of the federal government in an awkward position, as obviously to ensure a smooth transition of power, they would hopefully want to provide that sort of information.
Now, I've been in federal advisory for a couple decades, and I've never seen this happen before. So is it my imagination, or is this not normal?
It's not normal. So as we all know, an orderly and peaceful transition of power between a sitting president and the president-elect is a hallmark of a functioning democracy. A seamless transition is necessary for a lot of reasons: the stability of the country, national security, effective governing, and safeguarding of interests. Now, there has been a delay in the past, and you may have already heard some folks with political right, a number of Republicans point to the fact, and including the GSA administrator actually point to the fact that in the year 2000, the ascertainment was delayed until December. And that is true. There was no apparent winner of the presidential election until December of 2000. However, the country learned that this was a mistake.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for those who weren't following that was the 537 votes in Florida, the hanging Chad situation. But then it really was a different situation than we have here now, correct?
It is for a couple of reasons. The first and most immediate is what you alluded to. It's a different situation because the margins are very, very different this time around. That ultimately came down to 537 votes in one state. Differently this time around is that we have margins of several thousand votes in multiple states, and recounts rarely change your margin by more than a couple hundred votes. So even if you're waiting for recounts, they're not likely to change the outcome from what we know so far. And the second reason that it's different is because, as I mentioned before, the country learned that it was a mistake to delay the transition. So as the 9/11 Commission explained in its 2004 report, the delayed 2000 transition undermined national security, and it contributed to the failure to prevent the September 11th terrorist attacks. So in 2004, Congress actually amended the Presidential Transition Act to adopt recommendations from the 9/11 Commission to ensure smooth transitions between presidential administrations, helping keep America safe.
So this is making us less safe, and our enemies, both abroad and domestic, are watching us not be able to not only are they watching us not be able to make a successful transition of power, this is actually creating weaknesses in our government as we're making this transition, correct? Because my understanding is there's 77 days between the election and the inauguration, and these teams, I mean, this is probably, at least in my career, the most complex transition of power that I've observed because of the pandemic, the economic situation. And I'm going to be very frank, in my opinion, the shambles in which many of our federal organizations are in right now in terms of capabilities that Biden's going to be taking over as we transition from Trump. So, I mean, what is your opinion as far as the implications for national security and the safety of the American people as a result of this?
Yes, I certainly agree. There are a number of concerns here. It does pose national security risks, and we should note that actually just this week, 4 former secretaries of the Department of Homeland Security from both Republican and Democratic administrations issued a statement urging the GSA administrator to go ahead and make the ascertainment, because again, it does not at all hinder the ability to challenge in the courts any election results, but it does facilitate a smooth transition of power in the event that Biden ultimately is inaugurated. So they have already called on this ascertainment to happen because of the national security implications. We've also seen that over 160 former national security officials, former ambassadors to the UN, former federal workers who have been deeply engaged on these from our military, and including some Republican congresspersons, have also called on the GSA administrator to go ahead and make the ascertainment based on national security reasons alone. It does put our country at graver risk, and as we saw in the transition between President Clinton and President Bush, delaying the ascertainment and delaying the transition process actually even pushed back the final confirmation by the Senate of several high-level national security officials by almost 6 months. So it wasn't until well into 2001 that those background checks, security clearances, and confirmation processes were complete.
So for those who don't work in the federal government, security clearance processes can take a really long time, right? And so that's part of this, is we need all of those 77 days, as many as possible, to get people through these background checks and security clearance processes. I mean, even if Biden knew everybody who was going to be on his team, he could need all those days just to get through the security clearance process. Is that part of this, or is that what I'm understanding?
The security clearance process is definitely part of this. As I mentioned, Congress very intentionally amended the Presidential Transition Act in 2004 in order to allow that process to begin earlier, as soon as possible after the general election was complete, so that you do not have this type of delay and pose a similar risk to national security. So we certainly have better laws to try and facilitate this now, and we have lived history to know that this is important and that it's essential to the security and functioning of our country.
So what would happen though? Let's just say that they do all these recounts and the 0.0001 impossible scenario comes up, and it turns out that Toupee Fiasco, pardon me, has won. So what is the downside though if we had certified Biden and given him access to these resources, knowing that he's been vice president before, he's had access to all of this type of information before? What would be the risk to the nation of having done this?
There actually isn't a risk here. First, as you noted, obviously it's Vice President Biden, so it's a little bit different than even if you had a newcomer. But also the law doesn't require the election results to have been certified before you provide this information. It just needs to be ascertained who the apparent successful candidates are. So even if President Trump were to remain in power, even if the election results were to somehow shift from what we know now, or somehow the various lawsuits added up to a different outcome than what we expect it to be, and what we understand will likely be based on the results we already have, it would not at all affect his ability to govern into a next administration.
So this doesn't hurt Trump's ability to do his job at all, because we've heard things from Mango Mussolini before. Sorry, I'm cutting my own credibility here about this, but it's true that, for example, the impeachment proceedings interfered with his inability to do his job. And I do mean inability, because I mean, he might have had a few fewer days to play golf because of the impeachment proceedings. And sincerely, we don't want to interfere with any president's ability to do their job. Do you see a scenario in which certifying Trump could actually make us less safe by interfering with the sitting president's ability to perform his duties?
For the purposes of this law, absolutely not. I mean, it contemplates providing that information before states have certified election results, before those election results have been sent to Congress to then receive the votes of presidential electors. So all of this is meant to kick in months before that process is finalized, and certainly before you have an inauguration. So by design, it is meant to facilitate a smooth transition, just based on who appears to be the successful candidate from as soon as possible after the general election. So by design, this is not at all meant to hinder a sitting president's ability to continue to do their work of serving the country. It's meant to smooth the transition of power.
So a couple things going on now. Who can do something? What can we as citizens do? Can our congressmen do something? Do we need to change the law, for example, so that rather than having an appointee doing this, should it be a careerist? I mean, if we can't do it, first question, can we do something about this now? And if not, how can we prevent this from happening in the future so we can protect our democracy?
Right. Well, the first things that could be done at this moment would be to certainly call your congressperson, call your senator, and ask that they demand that the GSA administrator ascertain that Joe Biden is the president-elect and Kamala Harris is the vice president-elect. You can also call the GSA directly by checking out their website, gsa.gov, and looking for the contact information to write and call them. But in terms of future reforms, I think a lot of things are going to be contemplated after this moment for ways to depoliticize this process.
So what about my colleagues?
I have a question. If you don't mind, we can put a pin right there real quick, because that's one thing that's really concerning for me, is what can we do? So I have women and men in this group, and I have seen the frustration, I have seen the concerns, and I have actually been asked, what can we do? And I heard you say clearly we can call our congressmen and our senators in our various states. But what would, you mentioned it, but can you just repeat that information again? Because I'm going to actually post this for them. So what is it that they can say via phone or email, whatever the communication is that they use to get their attention? Because I know there are people that want to do that. I'm one of them. And then that same communication, I'm sure, would go over to the GSA as well. And that's what we could do now. And then my second question is, what could we do later on so something like this doesn't happen again? Because this is clearly an abuse of power. And he needs a psychological check. So I'm just not understanding why we can't do anything, or is there something we can do?
Right. In the short term, yes, calling your congressperson, calling your senator, and asking that they demand that the GSA administrator ascertain that Joe Biden is the president-elect and Kamala Harris is the vice president-elect. could heighten the attention to this issue and make clear that the GSA administrator has heard from your elected officials and from your representatives on this. And then you can also contact the GSA directly. The website is gsa.gov, and there's contact information available there. So those are things I think in the short term for them to hear from folks, that people are very concerned about the fact that this is delaying a transition. And it, and Protect Democracy comes at this from a purely nonpartisan perspective. Like, this is causing national security concerns. This is likely to delay the smooth transition between administrations as you think about a COVID-19 response, the economic recovery from the pandemic. Also, as you think about the distribution of a potential vaccine and a future administration, there are things that are very tangible that affect people's lives, that even regardless of how the election has shaken out or shakes out, these things need to operate in a very smooth fashion, and the information needs to be shared.
I have a question. Hi, Ngozi. So I'm glad that you brought up the point of 9/11 and the soft correlation between the time that it took for us to make a smooth transition. There's some other mitigating factors, but that being one of them that made us vulnerable to what happened during that time. As we started to go through the process of dissecting some of the decisions or moves that the US made that put us in that position, it wasn't probably until 2006, 2007, where we really started to have a serious hardcore conversation about what those core problems were, identifying them, and then coming up with solutions. But by that time, we were about to transition into another election. At that time, we ended up moving from Republican to Democrat, and unfortunately, Obama inherited a lot of that conversation. I would like to say that the US is intelligent enough to still be able to stay focused and continue along that path of holding those people accountable that were the direct cause of those issues, but we don't. A lot of us are groupthink, and so when the conversation redirects, so does our thought process, and so does our blame. What can we do moving past this period, not only to hold the people accountable that need to be held accountable, but to make sure that the perception follows that accountability? If Biden gets into office and he transitions successfully, we don't want him to inherit this conversation. We want him to be able to put onus where it belongs. So come 2024, we're able to remember this period and make smarter decisions.
That's an excellent question, Kim. I think that in those conversations, when you're calling your elected officials or representatives, you should also bring up the fact that they should be thinking about the Presidential Transition Act and ways to strengthen it, to depoliticize it, even though it has rarely been politicized, but to depoliticize it even further so we don't have to have this conversation again. I think we should have learned the lessons even from the 2000 example and from the 9/11 Commission's report, where it's made very clear that this could put us in a more difficult position as a country, and it can heighten risk. And we should be very clear that this conversation shouldn't need to be repeated again every 4 years. We've been fortunate so far that norms have been observed and that we've not had repeated instances of GSA administrators delaying the transition for political purposes. But I think you're onto something here, that there is a way to have some reforms in place to figure out how we can improve this process going forward. I'm short on ideas for some of the more specifics on those particular reforms, but I do think that there's a right time for this conversation.
Do we have any legal recourse as a country? I'm all about accountability. So not only do I like to have the conversation, but I like to see the solution and the person being held accountable for it.
That's an excellent question. Under the Presidential Transition Act, there isn't much by way of legal recourse here in terms of holding the GSA administrator accountable after the fact for delaying a transition. There could be potential challenges under the act itself. It has not been litigated in the past, so it's difficult to say that there is in fact a legal remedy that could be provided. That in this instance, Biden could definitely sue. It's just a little bit ambiguous because we haven't faced this, right? So it's possible that it's already there, but it's hard to say that it is certain.
Do you have any other thoughts on what's going on with this transition, or even with this administration, that the American people should be, you know, we need to keep our eye on so many balls right now. What else should we be watching and be cognizant of?
I think with regards to the transition, you know, this is the primary, this is a period in which it's a little strange for the country, right? You have a sitting president who has not acknowledged the election results as we've seen them so far, but the process seems to be moving along. States have been certifying election results or begin doing that soon. Recounts are certainly underway in places like Georgia. So we have this interim period in order to be sure that we're prepared by the time Inauguration Day rolls around, and by the time Congress needs to certify the election results and accept the votes of electors. We don't have any indication yet that that is slowing down, apart from what is happening from the GSA from the GSA itself and the GSA's administrator. So I think, you know, keeping an eye on it, but it seems that so far our process appears to be working. We have seen a number of lawsuits to challenge election results, which haven't yet been based on any evidence, that have alleged instances of voter fraud, but we haven't seen any widespread instances of that would cause any type of legal concern. So, you know, there's a lot of noise right now in the system. There's a lot of noise about, you know, disrupting things and slowing things down. But apart from this ascertainment issue, it seems like our processes are working, and we should take great confidence in that.
So one of the things I thought was interesting about, as I looked through different media sources talking about these recounts, is my understanding is these recounts are occurring if they're in a certain margin of error. Naturally, we just have a recount. It isn't because there's a lack of faith in the results. It's just if it's within this mathematical margin, there is a recount. But there seems to be some media outlets that are implying that these recounts are occurring because there's a lack of faith in the numbers. Do you have any thoughts on that, or anything to share with our viewers about that? Because I do think it's important that people understand these recounts don't mean a lack of faith in the numbers, that it is a check and balance. Just if it's within this certain margin, we just do a recount just to be sure. That's just a matter of law and not something that they should be concerned about.
Yeah, that's right. They are a matter of law and a matter of law in each particular state. So the rules do vary. Some states have automatic triggers for recounts if they're within a certain margin, as you noted. And others still allow a candidate to request a recount if they're within some larger margin, or in some cases just to request it. But the history that we have with recounts in this country is that statewide recounts have rarely changed votes by more than a couple of hundred. The margins that are being disputed here in some ways are in the thousands. And so it doesn't seem very likely that these recounts would materially change, will certainly change the results of any statewide elections or materially change what we already know at this time. So you're right that just the fact that a recount exists, the fact that there's a legal challenge, doesn't necessarily mean that we should lose faith in what we already know about the election results, and in people's ability that people had to cast ballots. It doesn't mean that there have been any credible instances of irregularity that were widespread, that there were credible instances of voter fraud that were widespread. There's been a lot of noise and talk about these things, but we haven't seen evidence of this come forward. And so I think it's important to follow like what is actually being presented in court, and the evidence that we're seeing, as opposed to just the noise that, you know, we're going to challenge everything. That's not really indicative of what's actually happening and the faith that we should have in our election system.
Has there been any widespread evidence of voter fraud at all? Because I haven't seen anything. I've seen a lot of lawsuits go through and judges throw them out.
Yeah, there has not been. Actually, it's interesting. I think it was a New York Times article recently where they called up the election administrators, the lead election administrator in each state, and asked for specific evidence of widespread fraud and whether they'd seen anything, and had not been able to find it in any of our 50 states.
Yeah, a lot of it that I've seen so far, because I watched one of the hearings, and I think that one's in Michigan, and it was a lot of hearsay. You know, someone overheard, someone told, someone saw. There was no firsthand accounting or submission from a person who actually was part of any sort of fraud. So from what I'm seeing, that's a lot of the basis of it being thrown out.
I wanted
Ngozi,
to ask a question about, I'm not sure if this really this is just a sore thumb that I'm having because of the events and the things that are going on in DC this weekend. And I don't know, it's kind of aside from what we were talking about, but since it's something current and you're here, I don't know if it's something that you could speak to, but we all know what's going on in DC this weekend. So my question would be, although he and they won't claim that they're promoting this peaceful protest, would it be possible to hold, I mean, it doesn't seem like we can hold him accountable for too much. So is there something that we can do so that he won't incite these kinds of things? Because what it's doing is it's causing division. And so I know people have the right to peaceful protest, but does he have the right to be their leader and incite the kind of rhetoric, conversations, those types of things that's going on right now?
I think the most direct response to that is that the First Amendment does provide pretty wide protections for a lot of types of speech and a lot of types of expression and activity. I think there are some bounds to it, but for organizing a rally of folks whose opinions a lot of us will disagree with, and allowing these folks to come together, they do have First Amendment rights that are so protected, even if folks have First Amendment rights to challenge that speech and to disassociate from them and to make their voices heard even louder in other domains and other counter protests and other means.
Okay, because I say that because I heard people who didn't agree with what was going on, and people said that they were going to go downtown, so they were expecting certain things to happen. But I know I was watching a couple different news broadcasts last night, and they were asking people to stay home. So just before I got on this, I was trying to listen to some news, and I heard they had, it was pretty much peaceful, and they had a couple incidences, but they didn't say what. So I'm glad people did stay home or just not go in that area, because it could have been ugly.
So, and Ngozi, I know we promised just to keep you till 7:30. You're of course welcome to stay if you'd like to stay for the whole hour. I did want to thank you, but I do want to just, since on behalf of our entire team, thank you so much. I did want to just close with a parting question though. One of our big initiatives that are through Mary's and Vanessa's and Kim's wonderful guidance that we've been working on is, there's been so much effort on focusing on registering voters, on voter registration, and we know that we need to now move this to voter education. Based on your widespread experience with your organizations, where would you recommend that people and that our group and Americans start to focus as far as educating ourselves as voters, so that we can help maintain our democracy? Because there's a lot of us are really concerned about how sustainable we will be based on the things that we're seeing falling apart. I mentioned I've worked in a federal advisory for a few decades, and I now have to learn details of things that I never thought I would just need to know about. It was always a foregone conclusion to me that the president and vice president would be certified, and my job I'd be able to just do. Where would you think that voter education efforts should start focusing?
Yeah, well, there's so much to work on always, Jamie, and I guess not just in this year. But I do think that what this period has highlighted is just that there are a lot of issues regarding the functioning of our democracy that we've taken for granted as political norms and consistent with our history, because we didn't have as many serious challenges to push those norms or to disregard them and disregard that history. And I think the more that we can pay attention to these things, educate ourselves in the process in some instances as they arise, and also push our elected officials to try and make our democracy fairer, more inclusive, more equitable. We'll begin to chip away at some of these things that may surprise us whenever bad actors try to manipulate the system in their favor.
I do want to thank you and also give a shout out to the wonderful, fabulous Eli Lair at our street for helping to make that connection, who I just adore. He's been my friend for almost 30 years now. So I do want to thank him publicly for this, but I'll turn it over to the rest of the ladies in the group for their parting
I'll
thoughts.
just say thank you so much again for taking time out of your evening to spend with us. I feel like I learned so much, seriously. And they will be hearing from me by phone and emails this week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ngozi.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, everyone.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so
And
much.
thank you to Protect Democracy as an organization for their great work.
Yes, please also
Yes.
check out our website, protectdemocracy.org, to stay updated and follow additional information on these democracy issues.
Definitely. We'll put
We
that in
will.
the comments. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.
All right, everybody. So great information there. Thank you so much for that, Jamie.
I thought he was fabulous, but it seems like we got to, I think the bottom line here is that the federal government was not prepared for this level of dysfunction, corruption, and intentional interference with the functioning of democracy. And that's what we're seeing.
But we have to be quicker to act. That's the thing. I mean, I think the fact that we have already been here before and we had already addressed at least the majority of these concerns. I think it's problematic that we were so vulnerable to arrive here again, and almost half of the US population is on board with allowing it to happen. They don't have the wherewithal to see all of the holes that they are perpetuating by these actions. And I would love to say that Trump is acting in this manner because he honestly believes that it's going to have a positive outcome. For him, I err on the side of caution that it's almost punitive what he's doing. And in that, I look for opportunities to hold him accountable for anything negative that happens during this time.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head here. We know that this situation, when this happened in the past in 2000 with Gore, which was actually in good faith and was down to 537 votes, and there was confusion with the hanging Chad, contributed to the vulnerabilities that led to 9/11 and over 3,000 Americans dying, and us going into a gigantic war that cost us $1 trillion and more than 5,000 American soldiers' lives. How can we not understand that if this is making us vulnerable to another situation like that at a time when we just lost over 243,000 Americans to a pandemic, when there's a study that came out that if we continue on this trajectory, the infection rate at some point could be up to 1 million Americans a day getting infected with COVID. This is the road we're on, and this is making us more vulnerable this time. Frankly, we need to get all of our ducks in a row. And if there's no downside to the American people of giving Biden this access right now, why are we not doing this other than sheer stupidity and selfishness?
Okay, so here's the train that I'm on. I think that we need to get a legal strategist, and we need to try and forecast that once we come out of this period, what recourse do we have as citizens to push the government to hold him and his administration accountable? They know that everything that they're doing during this period and before is completely fraudulent, and the risk that it's putting us in financially, health-wise, and globally, I have a problem with that. So as far as energy, moving forward past this point, that's where I'd like my energy to be spent, making sure that at some point I see him in front of Congress.
And that also will make sure that nobody does this again in the future. I would also strongly encourage us to figure out how we make these positions careerists and not forget that he signed that executive order for Schedule F. And we need to hold Biden accountable. That's the one that takes these positions that are careers positions they're relatively senior in the federal government, but not the highest level, and converts them, if they're policy related, from careerist positions to federal appointees. Now, I won't go through all the implications from a human capital perspective, like destroying career paths, which is going to make us harder to recruit and retain federal talent. But what it does do is take more of these vulnerable positions away from careerists and make them political. So who knows what other problems are going to have like this in the future. But we need to make sure Biden tears that up right away and destroys it.
Does he have the ability once he gets in office?
Yeah, he can undo any executive order, because we don't want the Democrats behaving badly either. So we need to, first of all, we need to change the law that was passed that created this as a federal appointment, and anyway, and turn these GSA positions into careerist positions such that they can be as apolitical as possible, so that those folks are working for the American people, not the American president.
Yeah.
And get rid of that Schedule F so that we're not creating more of these situations, so we can prevent this from happening again. We need to trust our careerists. I think one of the more damaging things President Trump has done is to tell the American people that we need to have as few feds as possible. We all want small government, but what they mean by small government is we don't want the federal government being intrusive into our lives. I think in many ways, the federal government is more intrusive in our lives when they're incompetent and incapable. And we will have a more competent and capable federal government when we have enough federal employees for them to work in a way that is transparent to the American people, because they're competent and capable.
That's the part that I'm so confused about, because part of their platform, part of their rhetoric is that they don't want this, federal oversight impeding or intruding into their lives, but they're advocating for an administration that does just that. It's like, do you not understand the cause and effect of your actions? What you're asking and giving him the power to do is exactly what you're advocating for not having happen.
I want to ask you, because every last one of us on here are mothers. So have you had the conversation with your kid? Have your kids come to you about saying what's going on? And I know all our kids are various different ages, but I'm curious because I know we have tons of mothers that might be watching this and may not know how to have that conversation, because particularly if your kid is in school and taking any type of history, they're having the conversation.
Civics, government, yeah.
That's right. Particularly high school government, they're having the conversation whether they're telling you or not. So how are you having this conversation with your kids? Help some of the parents.
I'll take that one. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So I never wait for my children to come to me. I go to them and I ask pointed questions because I want pointed answers. So my conversation has been, hey guys, have you been paying attention? Because I know they hear and see everything. Have you been paying attention to what's going on with the election? Yeah, Mom, Donald Trump doesn't want to leave. Okay, you pretty much understand everything. And then I spend a little bit of time explaining the intricacies of that, and kids totally get it, right? So I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. But what I want to say also is that a great deal of what we're experiencing from him is all about education. Education is the great equalizer for everything. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, a lot of what Ngozi said, a lot of what we tend to say on this show, a lot of people are not going to get it. So I beg that we should try to keep these conversations as fundamental as possible. I truly think that they're a little too detailed. So what I think we need is a FAQ on this topic, and I'll be happy to work on that. Jamie, Kim, Mary, if you guys want to help, that's fine. but we need sort of a, what I used to call in training and development, a quick reference guide, right? Cliff notes, if you will. So that we cover the gamut and cover all of our bases in terms of people truly understanding what's going on. Nobody's going to go get a copy of the Constitution. Nobody's going to go look up what an EO is, executive order. I mean, I do that in my profession every single day. But I know this stuff. I've been doing it for 30 years. So those of us that haven't been doing this for 30 years, we need a way to understand what we're all talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's funny that you say that because, you know, I always say I'm not heavily into practicing politics. I just have an opinion on it. I'm more on the social level. But in my career, it's heavy project management. So what we have to focus on in my industry is the cause and effect. What's going to happen now? What could possibly happen later? What are the implications? And what are the safeguards we need to put in place to avoid any catastrophic events? And looking at this as a sample, and Mary, I love the question that you asked about conversations with our children. My child is, I think, a little bit behind all of your children. He's younger. He's just going into junior high school. So his conversation and his studies are more focused on where we were getting access, so suffrage, getting equal rights, segregation. And this situation created a great pathway for he and I to talk about cause and effect. You're studying the beginning phases, and you're looking at today the ramifications of some of those choices that were made. Even so much so, watching the movie about suffrage, and now here we are with our first woman vice president. You're seeing the outcome, right? It's amazing. Yay! You know, but also some of those core conversations that didn't receive a solution or some sort of resolution, they're still existent today. They're bubbling up today and manifesting themselves in different forms. So when we talk about understanding politics and the conversation and the terminology, I think it's also a matter of understanding cause and effect. So when we talk about the choices that GSA is making, when we talk about the conversation that Trump is putting out or the perception that he's putting out amongst his base, we also need to talk about what are the long-term ramifications of those issues or those conversations, and getting people to really kind of be proactive or have the ability to forecast where this may lead us. You know, we talk about abortion rights. It's not just women controlling their bodies, but it's about fair and equal access to choice. People are in a wide variety of situations. And while one person would love to say everyone should make this choice because I feel it's best, that's not the reality for everyone. And what are the long-term ramifications of taking away individuals' rights to choice? These are the parts of the conversation that we have to dissect. What we're doing today and where this is going to put us in 10 years.
Interesting. What the conversations I had with my son this week was sort of a combination of the two, because my boys are older. I have 13-year-old twins and a boy who's 15 and a half. And so what we were talking about was actually social media with, Parley coming online and these right-wing sites. The conversation we were, the cat's here! What we were talking about was actually indoctrination and radicalization, because I have very serious concerns about these websites, because I see them very clearly as indoctrination and radicalization sites, and keeping my children off these social media sites.
Jamie, these two.
I know. I'm trying to be all serious and talk about future, radicalization and future terrorists, and they're being awesome.
Jamie.
We can go into this next week, but in the conversation I had with my kids, looking at the current events about, the Million MAGA March going on in DC, and the idea of, are you educated? Are you getting right information? You're not going to get it in these groups. And I think when we look at what's going to go on at MeWe and Parley and these sites, is they took the lessons that was learned of how ISIS radicalized, and they took what was learned from how incels in the United States and Canada were radicalized and turned into murderers. They know how Fox News worked and didn't work, and now how they're taking those viewers and turning them to Newsmax. And they're going to be radicalization sites. And so how do we keep our kids off those sites? Because they are going to be radicalized. And I think that we're going to end up seeing terrorists coming, whether you want to call them Al Qaeda, vanilla ISIS, Neil Team 6.
No, ISIS.
No, let's call them, Jamie, let's call them what they are, homegrown terrorists.
They're domestic
Right.
terrorist organizations. That's what they
Right.
are. These are not militias. These are domestic terrorist organizations. And the purpose of Parlay, you know, Steve Bannon tried to create terrorist training camps in Italy. We're going to be doing that through these social media sites. That is their purpose. And a lot, it's, you know, is your neighbor next door necessarily going to go on those websites and become one? No, but there is a vulnerable population that is going to be targeted by these websites, and we need to keep our children off of them.
But that leads back to the conversation that you started about the weaknesses that the White House is putting us in right now. You know, even when we talk about the sites, we talk about the permits, and I just kind of said it to someone recently, typically when we are planning events, specifically ones that are engaged in and around inauguration, there's a certain level of information that we have to get privy to know what access we have and where we can go and what credentials are going to be made available. And a lot of that is determined by the request for protest credentials, authorizations to go and come into the city. So they track that conversation. They know when the conversation is bubbling up. Is he sitting on his head? That looks a little X-rated. So I'm
guys,
I'm trying to transition this to the reality that Parlay, that we had a sheriff who was arrested for suggesting that they behead Democrats on Parlay. This site is already being used for radicalization.
Well, my point is they do monitor those conversations. They do, you know, at least keep somewhat of a forethought or foreknowledge of where it's coming from and tracking who it's coming through. The problem that I have, however, is typically the securities that's in and around the White House, the people that have been placed in positions to kind of lead those efforts. And we're in a situation now where it's Trump and people that he's placed in these positions to lead these conversations. So, and we know their qualifications. They're not, you know,
You're telling me that Jared Kushner was not qualified to bring peace to the Middle East?
I suspect.
Solve the pandemic, address the housing crisis. I mean, run the space program, set up the Space Force.
Go with no, I don't think so. I'm just saying. So that's the part of worry. And we're here now. We have to figure out our best way out of it, our quickest way out of it. But at the end of the day, once we do come out of it, I want to be able to hold the current administration, meaning Biden and Harris, accountable for holding Trump accountable.
Well, the other thing I think we need to keep in mind too is Trump is just a symptom. We've got 70 million Americans.
Trump is a disease.
Who voted to keep him in office. They know he's racist. And I'm looking at you, white people. I'm looking at you. Because, and I know that you, those of you who are watching, did not vote for him, but you have friends and family who you are not having conversations with about this. We need to have these conversations with our friends and family who voted for this. I mean, I just stopped being friends and family with them because of that, but we need to have those conversations about what made it acceptable to vote for this man. He's racist, he's sexist. He let 240,000 Americans die of a pandemic, and he knew what it was, and he thought it was okay because at first it was killing off Black Americans in cities.
Do we have any updated numbers, Jamie, from inauguration? Any updated stats?
On the updated voting stats, I have not seen those. I can try to pull them up right now.
I do have some breaking news for a second, guys, and I just posted this. A federal judge rules acting DHS secretary unlawfully appointed, invalidating his DACA suspension. Hallelujah. So he's getting ready to lose his job, and he's tried to.
Y'all about to lose your job. Y'all about to lose your job. Y'all about to lose your job. Your job.
For nothing. You about to
lose your job.
You about to lose
your job.
I told y'all, we changing Jamie's name to Juanita. Juanita, you are a mess.
Did y'all get that? My internet is garbage.
Good.
We got that.
We're
We're going to get some good news. We're going to change this, but we
Win.
have 70 million Americans who voted for this, and we need to find a way to bridge this gap and reunite this country. Or, I mean, I think, you know, we can owe a lot of this win, let's be real talk now, to the Lincoln Project.
Mm-hmm.
But we may be dangerously close to having another President Lincoln and Biden, because we might have another civil war. We need to have some real talk about that and how we prevent that, because a civil war is not going to solve this in the way that we want to solve this. How do we reunite America? How do we deal with this? Because I
think a lot of things need to be changed. And I don't want to keep you guys too much later, but I'm just gonna say that there's a lot that needs to change. You know, you guys brought it up before, and I know he was talking about functional democracy and how the norm are things that the normal stuff that I used to complain about, I now wish for, because what we have right now is crazy. You know, the fact that we are going through all of this with these elections, the fact that he won't concede, why that, you know, and it's not written down anywhere, is what I've been hearing on the news. It's common courtesy. It was a gentleman. Now it's gonna have, they have to find a new term, because it's not gentleman, you know, courtesy anymore. But I know you like that one, didn't you, Jamie? But
I do. So at some point, it's going to be Madam President Harris.
Yep. Yep. It's going to be Harris Abrams 2024. Y'all get ready.
Hey, PAC ladies. I'm not going to call any names, but PAC ladies, what is the strategy? What are we doing? You know, after this point, we got some real agendas to hit hard, and
so basically the four of us need to get together and schedule a strategy call as soon as possible. I nearly have the website done. So the next step is the social media and then our strategy. So let's get together.
And for context,
let's get together. Okay, so context for those that are not familiar. After Joe Biden was called for as the president-elect, I went online, and well, actually before that, Mary and I were having several conversations about organizations like Emily's List, who require female candidates to have a buy-in somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million in order for Emily's List to back their campaigns. So I thought that was foolish, exclusionary, and outrageous. So I came up with the idea from conversations that Mary and I had and created something called the $10pack.com. And $10 is it symbolizes, not that we want everybody to give $10, but let's think here, America. It symbolizes the fact that I should not have to have $1 million to run for public office, okay? And as a lot of people know, when I ran for office in 2017, I was told that I needed a minimum of 10K in order to win a special election. I had about $2,000 the whole time, and we won. So don't tell me it's not possible. So $10pack.com is a result of multiple conversations and the desire to not put up barriers for women to run for office. So that's what we're going to be strategizing on to build right now to get ready for 2022.
Because and the other thing to circle this around to is, I think in a more broad context, we have checks and balances in the federal government. Nobody checked or balanced Trump because Congress didn't do it. The House tried, they did impeach him, and then the Senate just let him run roughshod over the American people. So that's what this PAC will do. It'll help us get more people in office, more women of color in particular, who are going to vote for accountability. If the Senate had removed Trump from office, we would not be in this situation. At some point right now, the 25th Amendment exists, and it would not be unreasonable, in my opinion, to say, this is crazy, dude's gotta go. I don't care if the inauguration is only we're 60 days away now, 60 something days away.
They should be giving him his walking papers now. Honestly, there has got to be something put in place for this type of behavior. There has to be something in place, and it has to be a check system that citizens can do in some way, shape, or form. There has to be, because when you have an idiot in charge like we do, and then you have another idiot in charge of the Senate who's not going to,
but his people reelected him.
Like you said, we got him impeached and they stopped it. So when we were able to get rid of him, we couldn't get rid of him because we had another idiot in charge. And when you have somebody and then you have their boys around them protecting them, what happens to the people? What happens to the people?
Well, I think that's why it's important to make sure that we hit the government from the local level. So we're looking at right. So if we're looking at a PAC, I think one of the things that's going to strengthen it is to have a local representative across the U.S. So there needs to be somebody that is part or spearheading the efforts in their local area with their local congressmen, with their local governors, everybody, to kind of rally the support so that collectively we can then hit the hill. So I think that's definitely, you have a wealth of options in the group to kind of pitch that conversation out to get people to step up and lead that charge on their local front.
And so more broadly,
those discussions are going to need to move forward very quickly. So I'm going to write up a plan agenda and have us discuss it, because a lot of what Kim just mentioned can be implemented very quickly. Okay, between the four of us, we know a lot of people in those powerful positions that are just waiting for us to come to them. They're literally waiting, and I know that. So let's just get it done.
And more broadly, let's all just start thinking about one of the reasons why we are fundamentally in this mess is the Electoral College. And we know the racist history of why we've got that system to start with. And we need to start figuring out who we need to get into office to get rid of that.
We need to get rid of it.
So the post, right. So the post that we just put up today, and I don't know if I did or somebody else, and with them going into the election, suspecting that inner city was going to be the area that they were going to target for the potential hit to Trump. And so that's why you saw a lot of the pre-election maneuvering of the post office with removing of the ballot boxes and trying to suppress the vote, but they were targeting the inner city. Where he actually ended up having, according to the numbers, a slight increase in the inner city. Where he flipped was in the suburbs and the exurbs. So I know, just based on their protocol in past, that's where they're going to target rezoning, redistricting, and taking a look at how they can manipulate the electoral for 2024. So I think that is definitely a valuable conversation to put on the docket.
Yeah, so we got to be watching that because they're going to try to gerrymander the heck out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this Georgia election, to Mary's point about if we can take those Senate seats, then who becomes the deciding vote, ladies?
We do.
If it's 50 to 50 by law, if the Senate is 50 to 50 by law, who casts the deciding vote in the Senate?
Kamala Harris.
So wait. Question. So we have 2 more in Georgia. Where are the other 2 again that we're still waiting for? Because there's 4 left.
I'd have to look it up. I've been so focused on Georgia.
I have no idea.
Because bless you, honey.
It's not a runoff, I don't think, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's not a runoff. I think it's just down to those 2 in Georgia.
No, it's 4 left. They were talking about CNN. Let me look it up. Hold on. Because today the conversation was, while the 2 in Georgia have a higher likelihood of flipping blue, they were banking on the other 2 not being of concern, which would have caused the split in the Senate. But then today, based on the numbers, I want to say it was Arizona.
Christy,
was it Wyoming?
Where they're from? Christy said 2 independents were elected.
Got it.
So, but
Yeah.
if it's 50-50, can we just take a moment and anything having to do with Kamala, I think we need to just bask in the glory.
So then that's another opportunity for us, because that means that we have to do an accounting of all the seats that we have that are blue and make sure that we're hitting them hard on the local level. So when they go sit in that seat, they vote party line.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I think we need to start trying to create a safer environment for Republicans of conscience to vote their conscience. I mean, the reality is the Republicans are so afraid of Trump right now that they are never going to vote the conscience. The biggest balls in the Republican Party right now are on Mitt Romney. There, I'll say it.
That in itself is a problem.
They're all completely feckless.
That Mitt
Every single one of them.
Although Mitt flipped though.
But that was his conscience. That was his conscience. He does vote wherever his conscience. We can agree or disagree with Mitt Romney, but he does vote whatever his conscience is.
Are they still counting votes?
You just heard me. The entire Republican Party is feckless and ballless, except for possibly Mitt Romney, which is saying something. So they need to step up.
Let's put him right on in there with them. He's just like them. Period.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that I would vote for Mitt Romney, but at least
I guess I could see that point, because when he did flip, it was on the abortion, and we know that he's a staunch.
Yes, that's he's going to go with. I mean, he has integrity of sticking with his story, and that's who he is as a person. So, I mean, do I agree with him? No, but do I think he's consistent with his integrity and who he is? Yes. The rest of them just all completely kowtow to Trump, like it's in some sort of a cult. And I think we need to find a way, free the Republican Party. We have been unable to free Britney from her father's conservatorship. Let's move on from free Britney to free the GOP. Do I want them in office?
I have to go eat.
Well, I think we have some opportunity in Maryland. We can start there, because he's heavily leaning. He was smart enough to not lean all the way blue, but he sure made it clear that he was not leaning party line red.
Yeah, Hogan in Maryland, I think we've seen him be willing to tell Trump to, I mean, if you look at what he did under, well, I'm trying to be good on this call and not embarrass my mother any more than I do on a daily basis. But if you remember what Hogan did with the COVID tests, he had them moved in from Asia under cover of darkness in the night on a plane, and then guarded by the National Guard so that the feds could not come in and seize Maryland supplies. he is willing to do what he needs to do for the good of Maryland with, you know, with 0 F's given. There, I didn't swear on our live.
Very good. I'm proud of you.
Very good, Jamie. Although I might say it though.
Jamie's working really hard, guys.
I am working really hard on
Let me
being
see
good
y'all
on this
give
live stream.
Jamie some likes and just
We're not swearing.
Yeah, for not
so-
swearing. Give it up for
No.
Jamie.
So I
remember,
just, oh, go ahead.
there used to be a time when Democrats and Republicans wanted the same things for this country. We wanted our families to be safe and secure. We wanted equal opportunity and economic development. We just had different ways that we agreed on how to get there. That's what we disagreed on. Now we seem to disagree on whether certain people are people, whether women are people, whether people of color are people, whether Native Americans are people, whether the LGBTQ community, and I forgot the IA, I'm sorry, are people, whether immigrants are people.
Children are people, or do they just throw them in cages like animals?
Yes. So I guess if you're a Republican now, you know, a couple cells sitting in a petri dish for in vitro, if you're Amy Coathanger Barrett, if you're deplorable ACB, those are people. But a child on the border can be ripped from their parents, put in a cage. We can lose that child or their parents because that's not a person.
They're only concerned about you until you come out of the birth canal and then you're on your own. Okay. So I do want to add this. I saw a tweet on Twitter this morning that really kind of was really profound to me. And I like to keep things simple and fundamental. So here it goes. For all of you 45 supporters that are trolling this show right now, this is for you. So the tweet went something like this. All of you that are surprised about what 45 is doing and has done should not be surprised at all, because when he came down the elevator, he told you exactly what he was going to do. And fundamentally, all he cares about is protecting his family business. That's it.
That's it.
So if you all Americans and everyone around the world can keep that in mind, then you won't be out here talking about, oh my God, I can't believe what he's doing. Oh my God, I can't believe what he just said. Well, you better believe it. He's had 4 years to explain it. He's had 4 years to explain it. And he's done everything he said he was going to do. Why are we out here still surprised?
I don't know.
First thing we hold up. First thing we have to do before we go making all these grandiose plans about how we're going to not have this happen again is first slow down, go back and study what he's done, and then we can move forward. That's how you don't repeat history. So that's all I have to say about that.
I do think we have.
Are you sure? Do you have anything personal you want to say to him?
Let's just count about it.
This is
She trumped you, Mary. Sorry.
loser.
Okay, but Mary, we do have to, I think we should also kind of give a shout out to all the wonderful women who came over, who were so engaged with the conversation about supporting democracy and supporting Biden Harris, that came new to the group after theirs shut down. So
I did that. I did a whole video for them.
you did.
If they didn't see it, I'll tell them again. Thank you very much. But I did a whole video and I welcomed them in the group. But yeah, everybody that came over from the other suburban group, it was Suburban Women for Biden Harris. We were originally the real Suburban Housewives for Biden Harris. So you've come over to our group from the other Suburban Housewives group. Y'all did a fantastic job over there. You had some really awesome admins over there. Y'all worked it out and did the thing. So we welcome you here to continue the journey with us. And so on that note, I'm going to get something to eat and eat some Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Yes, Vanessa.
Me too. Me too.
Cherry Garcia. Who likes Cherry Garcia? I do.
I don't.
I'm a chunky
I
monkey
don't.
girl. I'm a totally
Whatever,
chunky monkey girl.
Whatever.
Chocolate chip, mint chocolate chip,
Haters.
mint
No,
chocolate
what?
chip.
What's the flavor that I like, Mary?
Cherry Garcia.
No, the other one.
Half
can't-
baked?
Oh, and
I
shout out
can't.
to Kim for letting me know that the group was closing because I was so busy in my head, because y'all know I work with my head down. I can't see a whole lot of other stuff. Yeah, so thank you, sweetheart, for letting me
You're
know.
welcome, honey.
Post and stuff up there. I appreciate you because they have been coming over. I think we got about 400 women from over there.
No,
Oh, wow, welcome.
this is the
You know what?
movement. And these women have, you know, I can't help but continue to applaud them, because a lot of these women are standing up for what they believe.
We got some men too.
And men, in spite of their families, some of them in spite of their spouses. And they've told us these stories for the last few months of how they are living in communities where they are the odd man out and they are standing firm with what they believe. And so I applaud y'all.
Yeah.
One of the nicest things, you know, that expressions that I've heard that I think I would like to say to those women is, you are not just welcome, you are one of us. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah. So thank you all for watching.
Lady.
If you're watching on the replay, just put replay so we know who's watching it on the replay. Don't be shy when we're on these conversations. We want you to engage and ask questions. We want to hear from you. So even if during the week there's a topic or something you want us to hit on Saturdays, please let us know. It helps us out to be able to get the right people to answer your questions. Particularly if some people might not want to be out there and put their questions up. Text myself, text Jamie, text Kim or Vanessa, one of us, and just let us know, hey, you know, I'd like to really talk, can you guys really talk about this on Saturday? And we will work it in, won't we, ladies?
Oh, I will be happy to get you statistics on anything. It will make me happy to get you statistics. See, they're nodding.
And also, I am always here. I'm a social media consultant, so I can get you any information on social media, anything involving Capitol Hill, I can get for you. So don't hesitate to ask. Also, if the members of the group have suggestions for speakers, please get a message to Mary on any of the relevant topics. Please get her suggestions, okay?
Yep. I know one topic I had a member call me about. They want us to really talk about interracial relationships and families under this administration and how it's made them feel and different things and obstacles that they've had to deal with and stuff like that. So we will be hitting that topic. I have not forgotten. So if you're watching, I have not forgotten. Okay, it's right here. Trust me. All right. So have a good night, ladies, and we will talk to you, ladies and gentlemen, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Love you guys.